The countdown is on, and we are now live.
Yay.
You look all
Good
fall festive.
morning. I know. We actually have a little bit of fallish type weather, which is incredibly unusual for us in September. Usually we're roasting. I don't even think it's 60 degrees here yet. So
What?
I know it's kind of nice. I'm going to enjoy it while we can. We'll be back up towards the 80s next week, but it's been really nice to be able to get out and walk on my lunch break, which, usually, I mean, it's usually just been way too hot. So kind of liking it.
Well, I am, let's see here. Oh, hang on, Jen. I think that the notes you put in were comments, or were they in the
I
that's
did. I put him in his car.
everybody. Everybody.
Great.
To see all of our notes and stuff.
Clearly, I have not had enough caffeine this morning.
All good. I am actually was gonna pull up my weather out here. I haven't been outside yet. I thought I was taking the kids to school. Oh, it's 74. It's less where you are.
Right. That's crazy. It's 57 here.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and overcast. Well,
Oh
that's
my gosh. Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's fall, y'all, and it's about to get to be fall. I mean, like it's this weekend, Jen.
yeah. I know. Isn't that crazy how time has
Mhm.
just I'm moving into conference season. So a week from Friday, I go to Phoenix for a conference. Middle of October, I come see you.
Yeah.
Middle of November, I go to 20 Books Vegas. And so then there's Thanksgiving, and then there's Christmas, and then we're at the end of the year. And it's just that's what
It's
happens.
literally right. It's like literally I already feel like it's the end of the year. Like, I mean, I'm planning for next year. I was
Yeah.
sitting down, putting together some of the efforts for 2024. And so like I look at this calendar every day. Like I'm over here on the left side of me, and I go through it. And I'm like, it's done. 2023 is done, although not
Mhm.
really. Oh, hey, Doug, how are you? Oh my gosh, it's good to see you here. Not that you want to wish away ever a year, although this
Right.
year's crazy. I think somebody sent me a message recently, though, and it was really awesome. It said, I think I shared it with you, Jen. It was like, may the last third or last fourth of 2023 be the plot twist that you're waiting for. And I'm like, yes, please,
The
because
plot
this has
twist.
been a fun, interesting year as a whole, but a good year, Jen, a good year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and I love that idea of the plot twist, and I think that'll play into what we're talking about today with speaking,
Mm,
and how storytelling and storytelling with a twist can
yeah.
be a great way to engage your audience. And um, many authors that have a book out have speaking opportunities. And if you're a speaker and you don't have a book out, you are leaving money on the table. So there's the confluence of those two things is going to be what we're talking about today.
Yeah, and it's funny, not intentionally, but this morning I was actually working on my speaker resources, my speaker kit resources. So, part of being an effective public speaker is actually ensuring that the world knows that you offer speaking options, right? I mean, we can't in today's crazy chaotic space, we can't expect people to go, "Oh, Stephanie just sounds great. I'm going to invite her here." And have her be a part of this and all that loveliness. And not that people won't, but we want to make things easy for the people who are in need of a speaker and make it easy for them to know that that's what you do and how you can best serve them and everything in between. But also, like ensuring that when you're on stage, when you are sharing, sometimes the best way to continue your public speaking journey is by having people who have invited you to speak the first time to invite you to introduce you and invite you back and introduce you to other people. So sticking out on stage in a positive way, and not in a
Yeah,
negative, and storytelling does that, right? People
right.
don't want just a list of 1,000 things. I always tell authors, consider what are the three takeaways. I don't know why our brains can think in three, but what are the three
Three.
things
Yeah.
that you want to people to walk away from? And then how can you create a journey that's memorable? And that can be in different ways. Like I'll share one, Jen, that I recently did with you. I had a lot of fun with, or not with you, but I've told you before, a lot of fun with, and I want to pick your brain on it too. But I always know that the opening and the closing of any speaking engagement are the most important. And those are usually the things that I spend a lot of time memorizing or getting really comfortable and confident with the content. On the inside, I allow for ebb and flow because I'm more of a conversational speaker. But I was at a speaking engagement earlier this year, and I was talking about my latest book, Emergence. And I started with a phrase, and I asked everyone in the room, I was like, all right, I do this, or we've grown up with this nursery rhyme, and I always remember the first part, but I forget the last part. And everyone's looking around like, what is this lady going to talk about? And I said, Mary, Mary, quite contrary, how does your garden grow? I'm like, I know that. But
Right.
the second part, I was in front of 300 women, and it was funny. They all laughed and go, with silver bells and cockle shells and pretty maids all in a row. And I said, no, who is Mary? And I am a gardener, and that is not how gardens grow. Gardens grow,
Right.
right? And they were all like, what? And I spent a whole, the rest of my time on stage talking about the power of going through hardship and how manure can kind of grow us and develop us. And then I ended with going back to that nursery rhyme and rewriting it that has more relevance. That's something people remembered.
They're going to remember that, right? Because you took what they expected and you went in a different direction. And that's the thing. Whenever you kind of go against the brain's programming, it's going to sit up and take notice and go, wait a minute, that wasn't what I expected. I better pay attention and see what you're doing here. I think that's a fantastic way. And that's one of the things that story does is, and you took them on this journey, right? They were expecting this typical nursery rhyme, and you went, plot twist, we're doing this other thing instead. And I think that can be really, really powerful. So whatever your talk is, if you think about the one thing you want them to take away, and usually this is, especially when you have a book, this is tied into your book will expand on it much, in a much greater depth. And then think about the ways you can come at that in different directions. It's going to be new and fresh, and not just standing up there lecturing and giving information, but telling a story, providing experience, doing something that's going to be memorable for them.
People remember in stories. Like, we remember stories. We don't remember facts. That's why the stat, like 99% of statistics are made up, we don't remember those stats and statistics, but we will remember in stories. So as you look at, the things that you could bring to the table on stage from your book, I really want to challenge you to go, what is a story? Like, could you come up with 3 stories that go through 3 kind of topic points? For instance, when I talk about the importance of understanding your audience's needs, I talk about a brownie story that my husband and I had when we were grocery shopping. It is a vulnerable, funny story that tells a lot about my type A personality, and also about how we should all be grateful Corey's still with me after that experience. But it is funny. The crowd laughs. I'm able to relate to them on a topic that they are overwhelmed with, trying to understand your audience, but through the lens of, are you a corner or a middle brownie person, right? And what does that mean? And so how can you do that in a way, like you said, that's unexpected? It's this plot twist, but does it where people will walk away and say, I'll never be able to look at brownies the same.
Right.
In a good way. In a good way.
In a good way. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Those are the kinds of things that really stick in people's minds. I spoke last night to a group of editors, and I was talking about systems for success. And I have a much larger presentation for authors that I'm doing next week through Author Learning Center. So that's open to anyone. If you want to come join us, you can. We'll get the links somewhere. I don't know. They're on my social media.
Audrey said corner brownies are better. This is why Audrey's on the team, right? Jen, what are you?
Crunchy, right? I'm a center person. I don't like crunchy corner hard bits. I don't like burnt toast. I don't like.
Well, if it was just Audrey and I all the time, there would be no brownies left. So at least you can.
I can eat the center. It's perfect. You guys can eat the outside. I can eat the center. Have you seen those brownie pans where it makes them all corner pieces?
I used to have one, actually. I don't know where it went when we moved, but yeah. Sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you. You do have some really great things.
If you go on my social media, you'll find the Author Learning Center, and we'll try and get that in the comments too. I'll find it somewhere. But one of the things we talked about, and there are a number of things, but some of the things that we talked about was getting people to think about things differently, their work environment differently, and then engaging in a conversation. When you can have interaction with the audience, That's
Yeah.
another way, like you did with telling
Yeah.
them the nursery rhyme and having them complete it.
Yes.
Now they're engaged, they're a part of
Yeah.
it. And so if you can think of things in your talk where you can ask the audience questions, have them give feedback, that's going to make them think, am I a corner person? Am I a center person? Right now you're asking them to choose and kind of create an identity around where they fit. And that part of that is that's going to make them engaged now because they want to know more about, well, tell me more about my identity. Tell me more about what it means to be a center person versus a corner person, those kinds of things.
Right, and I'm actually trying to look. I took a note. Oh, of course, I won't be able to find it. I took a note this weekend at church. My kids were moving into a middle school ministry. I'll have to find it late. Oh, here it is. A middle school ministry learning on Sunday school. And they had parent day. So we were there or I was there. My husband's a leader. So he was interacting. But they had the kids go be with their groups and they spent like 10 minutes with the leader or with the parents. They used a couple tools. So I'm going to give you a couple tools to consider. One of the tools I jotted down was menti.com. I'm going to put it in the chat real quick. menti.com. It's something that I am wanting to explore in the near future myself and learn. But it was an interactive tool where you could do you could actually like ask surveys. People just took a photo of the QR code and then they could start interacting with
Oh,
you. And it was
fun.
awesome, super
Nice.
easy and awesome. So I love that because audience engagement, wakes people up. It makes them feel like they are a part of it. Then outside of that, I have pivoted away from PowerPoint because I feel like PowerPoint's a little boring in the world today and too static. So I use Prezi, for instance. Not saying you have to, but Prezi creates more of a movement journey. And I think I'm finding, especially virtually, when you leverage the virtual stage, it allows for a bit more kind of ebb and flow to the conversation. But a couple other things I want you to think about, whether you're using a tool like that or just yourself, is, what is something that makes you different than someone else? There was an author
Yes.
once, although I don't know that I would do this because people have aversions to smells, but like she would include a perfume into her conversation. So she would like spritz something and it was a part of her story. Or
Mm.
I've gone on stage earlier in my speaking career. When I spoke merely about perspective in my first book, I would come on with a thing of luggage. And everyone's like, is Stephanie moving in? I'm like, yeah, we are. And I would talk about the baggage that we all carry. And I would open up my luggage and I would pull out elements in it while I'm talking
Mm.
to help identify and move the story along and the conversation along. But people would be like, what's going to be out of the baggage? What's coming? So think about things you can do,
Yes.
to like keep you moving and grounded. It also helps me not be so nervous,
Yeah.
right? It also
Visual props they're perfect for that. They give
yeah,
you something to do. They give the audience something to remember, gives them something to focus other than you. And I love it whenever you do watch speakers that have really interesting illustrations where they bring in
yeah.
actual things to help
Mhm.
people remember the point that they're trying to make. Now, sometimes you can just remember the illustration and not the point.
Sure, right.
Uh,
Absolutely.
but that's at least a step in the right direction. I mean, you see this with commercials a lot, right?
Mhm.
You can see that there are commercials that are very, very memorable. And then you get to the end, you're like, I don't even know what they were selling. I
Right,
remember the commercial, but I can't remember what they were selling.
right.
But
We
the
don't
best
want
ones, yeah, the best ones, marry both. That's what you're ultimately going for. But illustrations, anytime you're activating all five senses, which I think the smell one is very interesting. I mean,
Mhm.
whether or not people had issues with that, they're still going to remember her.
They will,
And, so I mean, and the fact that, we're talking about it today even means that it's memorable. And you're like,
right?
wow, that's really interesting. Yeah, I'm not sure that I would do it either because of people with allergies to
Yes,
scent.
and real
But
sensitivities.
yeah,
But
but
it gives
scent,
you something. Like,
yeah,
smell is actually a really big, memory trigger.
it
Really
is. It
big.
really is. Yeah. And so I can see why it would really trigger what she's saying. It would link it with that smell, would definitely make that stick in your brain.
Right.
But the chances of it backfiring could also be quite large. So I
Mm,
think that's something to think about too, is that know your audience,
Yeah.
because depending on who you're speaking to and their expectations, you need to make sure that you are aligning with that. If you are speaking
Absolutely.
to perhaps a group of professionals, you may not want to be, full of jokes and
Sure.
silliness, and perhaps, maybe, I don't know, it could work depending on the group. But knowing where you're at, you might,
Yeah.
will change your tone. I listened to John Acuff's podcast. We've talked about him before
I
in his
love
book soundtracks, and his podcast is All It Takes Is a Goal. But he is a speaker. That's a big part of what
that.
he does, in
Mhm.
addition to writing books. And one of the things he talks about is, and he does a lot of corporate speaking, is learning about what they are. So if he's talking to orthodontists or dentists, he's learning about what are
Yes.
some of your inside things, about your industry. He was saying something like he spoke to a group of ophthalmologists. Now he has this great eyeball joke. I don't know where else you could use that. But getting to know your audience so you know the little
Yeah.
inside things that make it feel like you relate to them, like, oh yeah, you understand we have this issue.
Yeah.
People that speak to mothers of preschoolers, like that's the group, mops group.
Yep.
um, they can talk a lot about, you never get to go to the bathroom alone, you never take a shower alone, you never get to be alone ever until your children go to sleep, and then you're too tired to care.
Yes. Yeah.
um, and so that's a whole thing that you can talk about,
Mhm.
versus if you were to talk to a MOPS group about
Mhm.
career aspirations and how you're going to nail it on your next launch or whatever,
Mhm.
they're going to be like, I'm just trying to survive the next day. So
Absolutely.
you've got to match your audience and know them quite well. And if they feel like you know them well, they're going
Mhm.
to listen to you. If they feel like you don't understand what I'm going through, then I'm tuning out, because you don't get what my life is like.
Yeah, and we don't want that to happen. We don't want you to fall flat. We want you to share a message, right? And we don't want your time and those in attendance, their time to be wasted. So
Right.
when you spend time getting to know, and you know how I feel about target audiences, right?
Mhm.
Like you need it with your book, you need it with your business
Right.
and everything in between. But taking that time, people feel heard and seen, and it's memorable. And then you'll be asked back for more. I remember reading that about John and how he does that. And I was really impressed that he goes to that level. I think when you know your content well enough,
Yeah.
you're able to allow it to ebb and flow based on the people in attendance.
Mhm.
I was asked this summer or this summer, I guess. It's not, is it summer anymore? Like a couple months ago, I guess that was this summer, to speak in front of some minority business leaders. And, usually I'm talking nowadays to or to authors or aspiring authors. And I was really, really close understanding to a what I call the entrepreneur equation, which is how do you really build a business from a message that you have. And
Mhm.
I wasn't when I was reflecting for the presentation, I took a step back and I'm like, this has major applications to entrepreneurship and anybody, right?
Yeah.
And so I knew kind of the core of what I was going to talk about, but I was able to adjust it to meet them. And I think that's what successful speakers are able to do. You're able to identify your differentiator, know it inside and out, and then work with the people around to make sure that you're showing up how they need. I'm you don't see me doing this right now because I have a cat who's trying to jump up and I'm moving water around. But another tool in your toolkit that I want to share is if you do a lot of virtual speaking.
Mhm.
I just got a standing desk, Jen. I know
Oh,
we've
did you?
I'm
Yay.
moving today, right? And
Yes.
so you have to be aware of like, how you move. It's you need a strong gait. But I'm finding that when I'm, with client meetings or when I'm doing workshops or whatever, if I can be up and move my hands or whatever, I am even more engaged. So
Yeah,
if
more energy. Yeah, for
yeah,
sure.
and
Yeah.
it's better for your body. It's a win-win.
Yeah.
Plus, I think it keeps me like on par and ready for when I have more in person because
Yeah.
I can't be sitting down in an
Right.
in-person one. Although I
Right.
have before, it's kind of fun sometimes, but you don't
Yeah.
have to,
Right.
right? And many times you're up and moving. And so, anyways, I found you can get a really affordable standing desk nowadays that allows you to do that. And I think the person on the other end will feel the energy you're giving, which is
Yes.
a bit different.
Yeah.
So even though in person, virtual have different nuances, don't forget that like we live in a world where you can reach almost anybody now
It's
and
true.
share your
It's true.
message in really beautiful ways.
Yeah, we've got so many options now. It's not like you have to get on a plane and go places or that you're limited to your local geographic. The one I gave last night was virtual. We had people from Wisconsin, the Carolinas, Florida, all the way out to here in California. And it was really fun to have that many people in, one room. And we're talking about, what the weather was like and different, who has fall weather, who doesn't have fall weather, and it was just a fun little thing to connect with people that you normally would not be in the same room with, if we were relied on geographically.
Right.
Obviously, there's differences between online and in person. And people are much easier to be distracted when they're
Yes.
online because they can have their email, they can have Facebook up, they can have all these other things. So
Yes.
you have to be even that much more engaging. And that's why it's important to bring that energy and keep them engaged with things so they don't want to be distracted. They want to be paying attention to what you're saying.
One of the things I love about both of us speak with the Author Learning Center. One of the things I love is that they actually do surveys afterward of all their attendees. And as a speaker and someone who's building and growing and continuing to evolve, you want to know how the things you're saying are or are not resonating.
Mm-hmm.
And I love getting those survey feedback. Like she compiles it and allows us to see it. And I'm really grateful because it reminds me of like, for me, I mean, I'll share, Jen, my problem is always pace. I just go so fast and I don't mean to. I just have so much to say. Not
Right.
that
It's
not
hard.
that that's
There's
a
a lot
bad
to say.
thing,
Yeah.
right? Not that that's a bad thing, but I appreciate the permission to slow down, and sometimes I will forget that. But the ongoing feedback I get is the energy that I bring, and that is
Mhm.
really helpful to me, and it fills me up to know that even if I'm having um, a day that doesn't feel as energy filled, like it still is being able to be portrayed adequately and effectively. So yeah, I mean, I love getting that type of feedback. And I think speakers need a thick skin, just as authors do, and as you get feedback, uh, notice trends instead of individual things. Same thing with your
Very
book,
true.
right?
Very true.
If you have lots of people telling you something about your book, you probably need to look into it. If you only have one, it could be an outlier who's having a bad day and thinks it's fun to pick on people, right? Like we don't
Yeah.
want, right? But feedback I think is really good, especially as you're building it. And that can also come in getting video of you and looking at that, which is probably the most horrific thing to do for me. I hate going back and watching video of me on
It's
stage, but
hard.
it does make you better.
Yeah. Because you do things you don't know that you're doing.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
know.
Right.
Exactly. Like I notice my posture is not what I always want it to be, right?
Mhm.
And so that's something I have to do. Or I have a tendency, I mean, I'm just laying it all out, Jen. I have a tendency for my eyes to kind of look places. Like I look at people,
Mhm.
but especially virtually, if I'm thinking, I might look off screen and kind of think like that. And I notice that. So I have to like work on it, right? Like it makes it better. I don't know that anybody else notices at the same
Right.
level, but I do. And I mean, we always get the chance to improve in life.
Absolutely. And that's the thing. I was listening to a podcast and they were talking about authors on YouTube. And she just said, just accept the fact that your first few are going to be bad, right? And the good news is nobody's watching them, so it doesn't matter. Uh, but I think that's really good advice for speaking as well. The first few times you speak, it's not going to be your best. You might be nervous. You might have some weird ticks. You might do some strange
Right.
things. And that's part of working your system out. Maybe your
Mm.
pacing wasn't correct and you had to rush at the end because you didn't leave yourself enough time, whatever it might be. There's a lot of things
Right.
that happen.
Right.
And that's why it's great to start with smaller groups, local groups. A lot
Yes.
of people swear by Toastmasters because you get your
Right.
experience of getting up and talking in front of people and a bunch of things like that. Local chamber groups, networking groups that
Yep.
are always looking for speakers to come in, any kind of
Yeah.
local groups. And then you just get your feet wet, especially if it's a friendly audience of people that you know or somewhat know. That can be really helpful
Mhm.
because they're not going to boo you off the stage.
Right, or have a friend like Jen, and together you all come together and say, I need to figure out how to show up virtually, like, as strong as I want to. You down for doing, like, a weekly thing with me?"
Right.
And I mean, if we were to go back and look at some of our beginning ones, I'm sure we were a bit more rigid than we
Yeah,
are nowadays,
it's
you know?
true. It's true. We did have a little more of a structure. We have less
Right.
of a structure now.
Yeah, I know, but we know how it rolls. I mean, but it's almost about 2 years in that we've been doing this class.
Like crazy to believe.
It's crazy, but fun and awesome, and I'm grateful for you. I'm grateful that we get to show up every week. I know last week we had some crazy stuff and we weren't able to last week, but we're happy to be here. And we've got one more week left. We're talking about speaking, but if you all have specific questions around speaking in general, building your author speaker business, or things that you have struggled with or not sure how to go, of course, we're always happy to adapt our beyond the page conversations to go around what you need. So put it in the comments, send us each individual messages. We're super pumped to do that. Jen, I'm reading some stuff right now, but I don't have anything like at my fingertips. Are you out there reading? Are you still
I
reading
am
that
still
book?
reading the
No,
idea
you're not.
factory. I am still reading it. It's so interesting because they're talking about this is in the 40s, and they're talking about new computers starting to be used,
Yeah.
and the ideas of how they came at it. And so one thing that I took away was this one particular researcher. This is at Bell Labs, which
Mhm.
is AT&T basically. And so he was playing with different computer ideas. He made a mouse that to go through a maze, but to learn from the maze. And then he was working on a computer to play chess. And his superiors were like, "What does this have to do with the phone company?" And he was saying, "Well, maybe nothing, but maybe something. We might be coming at a problem from a different angle. We're not
Mm,
hitting the telephone connection issue head on, but we're
right.
trying to understand how systems work where we can use them and adapt them." And that really struck me as
Mhm.
when we run into problems or when we're looking at something that seems really, really big, sometimes coming at it from a side solution. He calls it kind of like driving a wedge. And
Mhm.
I'm going to take this one piece of the problem and see if I can figure it out. I'm going to take this one area. So perhaps you can't figure out how to structure your whole book,
Yeah.
but you might look at one chapter. You might look at one section of a chapter and think about that. So I just really love the idea of let's come at it from a different angle, from a different way, something we haven't tried before, and
Mhm.
see what that tells us, what information that gives us. So sometimes hitting something head on, if you're not making progress, try it
Yeah.
a different way. And so I thought that was really, really
I
interesting
love it.
advice. Yeah.
It's really good advice, really for anything. I mean, I'm thinking about the current book I'm working on and the barrier I had that I just got over because I approached it a little bit differently,
Mhm.
or even a speaking business and topic. Like sometimes the concept of I have 30 minutes on stage, what do I do? Like you might get hung up. I usually get hung up on that opening. Like the opening is
Mhm.
really important to me.
Right.
But then if I'm hung up, I'm like, it's okay. Maybe that needs to marinate and I'll just figure out what are the three takeaways,
Right.
or what are the stories, or I might get myself in a different location. That's where innovation happens, and I think
Yeah.
it's looking at things in different angles or asking people for insights.
Yeah.
um, it requires you to be vulnerable,
Mhm.
and you don't have to use everything everybody tells you, but I do think I have a client who tells me regularly 1 + 1 = way more than two.
That's very true. It's very
Yes.
true.
So how we come together can create something so much more stronger than what we could do individually.
Yeah.
All right, friend. Well, I'll see you next week. Same time, same bat station.
Sounds great. We'll see. We probably won't have as much fall weather next week, but we will be here to talk about
Yeah,
speaking, regardless what the season is,
exactly.
and have fun with it.
Absolutely. Well, send us off.
Your author, your words have power. Your message has power, whether it's written or spoken, and you have power. So we invite you to join us each week as we take that to the page and beyond and discuss all things books and marketing. Have a great week. Bye bye.
See you next time.